Hi, my name is Dalton, and this is my testimony. I do want to say a little trigger warning before I get into things. I talk about abuse and some very dark things that happened to me as a child. But I'm going to jump right into it. So, we're going to start off when I was 4 years old. Um, my family and I have just moved back from Texas to Virginia. We moved back in with my grandparents. I was a huge wrestling fan growing up, still am. But my grandfather was the one that got me into wrestling. From about the ages of 4 to 7, I used to, you know, hang out with my grandfather and watch wrestling with him. He molested and sexual abused me from that time range from 4 to 7. Um, Sitting in the living room alone with him, and there was other incidents. Strange thing is, when he did stop, when I was around the age of 7, my brother, who is 9 years older than me, started picking up from the abuse there. This lasted till I was about 14 years old, the abuse, but there was a lot of other darker things going on there. My brother is a Satanist. I pray that he's still not. I pray that he comes to know the Lord, but he did ritualistic abuse on me as well. Very horrible things that I didn't understand as a child. Um, and there was a part of me that wanted to protect him because he was my brother. And I was told things like if I spoke up about anything that we were doing, that I would become an orphan, things like that. I always kind of protected him, even though, especially as I got older, I knew this wasn't normal, what I was going through. We eventually did move out of my grandparents and we moved to a little bit northern Virginia. Um, so I used to visit my grandparents' house pretty much every weekend growing up. So, the abuse basically just, kind of started being on the weekends. Um, the enemy was attacking me obviously very hard. Um, with the satanic ritualistic abuse stuff, I was riddled with nightmares as a kid. I had a lot of sleep paralysis incidents, which I'm going to talk on some of those that I've experienced, but I experienced those throughout my entire life. My brother also introduced me to horror movies at a very young age, probably younger than most kids should be watching, horror movies like that. Um, so anyway, one of the sleep paralysis kind of episodes that I used to experience, and this was only at the house in Northern Virginia, which was um, strange that it was. I only experienced these types of nightmares there. I did experience nightmares as well when I was at my grandparents where the abuse was taking place, but not to the same extent. So I used to have dreams where it was my room exactly. So, most of the time when you have a nightmare or a regular dream, um, if you're in your house or something like that, it's skewed. It doesn't look exactly the same. Maybe your room's a little bit bigger, smaller, things like that. That wasn't the case. It was my room exactly. There wasn't anything skewed, um, and it felt very real. So I would have dreams where I would start levitating off of my bed. I would get thrown all around the room. I would never hit anything. Like I would come close to hitting walls, dressers, things like that. And I would randomly get placed down somewhere. Sometimes this was on the floor, sometimes it was back on my bed, sometimes it was on. I had this large dresser chest thing. I got placed on there before, and then it was like I would come to like I was waking up out of a dream, but I would be in that exact spot that I was wherever I was placed at. Very demonic. Of course, I didn't realize this at the time. So the abuse kept going on. I kept having nightmares like this, riddled as a kid. with nightmares. At about 14, when the sexual and ritualistic abuse stopped with my brother, um, he taught me about safe sex, so condoms, things like that. Um, and he did it as like a almost like he was doing some sort of good deed. I remember him telling me, "I taught you everything I know now." Like he, over that, 7 to 14 years old, like he did something good. Like he taught me something good. Very evil, very sick. Um, but then it in some ways that stopped, but other forms of abuse stopped. He started introducing me to drugs. Um, Started off, with marijuana, um, but then slowly started introducing me to other drugs too. Um, Thankfully, only by the grace of God, I never got addicted to anything, especially anything hard. I never did anything like heroin, meth, crack, some of the harder ones, but aside from those, almost anything else that you can think of, I've done. Um, so that went on until I was you know um, 20, 21. I then during around 18 to 21, I moved back in with my grandparents from Northern Virginia. I became basically my grandfather's caretaker. Um, so the man that initially first started abusing me. I took care of him. I worked part time at a pet store and was going to college part time. He did eventually, um, passed away. His body was deteriorating. His doctor at that time, it was during the painkiller epidemic, so he was full on, an addict to painkillers, which made me hate painkillers. Um, but yeah, that's all he did. He sat in a chair all day. His body started to deteriorate. I had to help him in a lot of things. I remember times where I had to help him off the toilet. Things like that were really hard on me at such a young age. And then, when he did pass, I was still going to college at this time. I was going to college with my brother, working part time at a pet store that my brother also worked at. But after my grandfather passed, after his funeral, I just felt like I wasn't doing anything good with my life. And even though I was going to college and doing well in college, I just was, very depressed. Um, and I know I needed to make a change. I know I needed to get out of there. At that time, my parents had moved down to Florida. Um, and so I wanted to go into the military. One of the reasons I didn't go into the military sooner was I ended up getting a GED. Um, I was basically expelled from school. That's another story I won't get into. But yes, I was expelled from school. I was going to go into the Air Force with my friend at the time, but I had to have 15 college credits. So that's why I kind of ended up back down at my grandparents, kind of becoming my grandfather's caretaker. Well, at this time, I had, the 15 college credits. Um, so instead of going into the Air Force, the Navy appealed to me more. I always liked being by the beach. Um, so that was my goal. I called my parents and told them, I'm not in a good place up here, but I, want to do something better with my life. I want to go into the military. My parents did let me move down to Florida with them. My parents are um, bodybuilders. They're more power lifters now. They own a gym. Anyway, I had to get into shape because I was overweight. Um, and that's all I focused on. I stopped doing any sort of drinking, stopped with marijuana, and anything else that I was doing prior to that. So I get into really good shape. I decide to, um, you know, go into this fully. It took about, after getting to the right weight, and then going to MEPS, taking the ASVAB, things like that. The job I was going to be was a GSM, gas system turbine mechanic. Um, anyway, there was a 9 month waiting period, so that 9 months, I just continued working out to get as fit as I could, so basic training would be easy. So I get into basic training, um, and at this time, all the abuse and things that happened to me are buried in the back of my mind. I had full on PTSD and didn't even realize it. When you go into basic training, they try to break you, things like that. And my PTSD symptoms started showing, even though I didn't realize that's what it was at the time. There was an incident where, I used to shake a lot. And I woke up early one morning and I'm at my bunk. We had like these little drawers on our bed where we could pull out and had all our things in it. And I was going in there to get my clothes, to, get dressed. We're all getting, ready first thing in the morning. And I had an incident where I shaked and threw my lock off to the side. And one of the instructors saw that. They came over, and I guess they noticed other things with me as well. Um, and they were like, "Hey, we need to, get you checked out. We need to take you to Tranquility, which is a hospital on base." So, I ended up they going there. They ended up taking me to like the psych office. I had to take some long test that they made me do. I did the test, and I ended up talking to a military therapist. The therapist, from looking at the test and just talking to me, she knew something happened to me. She knew that there was some sort of abuse, and she was trying to be subtle, but she was trying to make me come out and talk about it. At this point in my life, I was not ready to talk about that. I was like, nope, nothing happened to me. So she ended up diagnosing me with major depression and social anxiety, and I got medically discharged. So I get home, I go back to Florida, and my parents were encouraging. They did their best to encourage me, um, but they also told me to lie. Um, And this was a common thing growing up too. My parents, they told I was very brutally honest as a child. I remember my mom telling me it's okay to tell white lies sometimes. Obviously, it's not. Um, so she tells me to tell people that I have a heart murmur. She fabricated this entire story. I went with it, and the reason she did that is because she didn't want people to think I had mental issues, because there's a social stigmatism against that. So I told people this for years. One of the people that I was training with before going into the Navy, he was a rescue diver in the Navy. I told him the same thing. Told the rest of my family this. My parents were the only ones that knew that I was got discharged from major depression and social anxiety. Um, Anyway, I bounce back. I start going to college again, and I'm, living in Florida. I ended up working a part-time job at Dunkin' Donuts while going to school full time. The I had an internship at the college I was going to. I ended up getting a job there. I wanted to go into network administration. I was always pretty savvy with computers and technology. So I ended up doing an internship at a Christian hospital. I won't say which one, but um, anyway, I ended up getting a job. They just so happened to be getting rid of one of the techs when I was doing my internship there. Um, and, they basically already trained me, and they never had an intern like me before, meaning um, I did the internship for the first half of the semester because I was going into a programming class that I was worried about it was going to be difficult. So I wanted to make sure the internship was completely done before I started that class. Um, anyway, I did my complete internship in 2 weeks. Like I basically worked a full 80 hours those 2 weeks. I ended up getting the job at the hospital. I was able to get my own car, and I was able to start saving a lot of money because I was living rent free with my parents. Um, and this at this time, you know, I kind of bounced back and forth between being atheist and agnostic. After the abuse and things stopped, I think that was mainly just a way for me to cope. Um, I didn't either want to acknowledge that there was a God, or if there was a God, I didn't want to acknowledge that it was any God that was being worshipped today. Um, but I think that's where, the Lord started slowly working on me. There's scripture written in the walls at the hospital. There was the the screensavers had Bibles verses, things like that. So even though, I wasn't a believer, I was still seeing those things and, basically seeing it every day. Um, and, during this time too, especially, I was really excited about the Navy and traveling, but there was also a depression that I had very well during that time. Um, it got a little bit better when I started working at the hospital and had like a real job. But it was still there. I still experienced, sleep paralysis. Um, One of the experiences I want to speak on, and I just want to speak on it just to, we know the enemy is very evil, but this one always stuck with me, and I do believe sleep paralysis is the enemy attacking you. There's so many stories online. If you research it about people experiencing the same thing, it's very demonic. Things like that. So I had a pug. Um, Her name was Puggins. Um, and I had her while I was taking care of my grandfather before all this was going on. Before I went even down to Florida. And she was like my daughter. Like she was, I cared about her so much and loved her so much. Um, I was able to take her to Florida with me when I was going into the Navy. But when I went into basic training, she went back up to Virginia with my brother. So, when I got back, I started going to college, was working part time at Duncan, things like that. I didn't have my dog anymore, and that was another thing that really crushed me. So, one of the sleep paralysis incidents that I had, my blanket was over my head. So, couldn't see anything, but it felt like something heavy was sitting on top of me, breathing so heavy. And I'm just trying to, muster up the energy to move my hands to remove the blanket. I'm able to finally do it, and for a split second, there's a piece. My Puggins is on top of me, and I'm so happy for that split second. I start rubbing her. I come to, and then all of a sudden, it was just my pillow on top of me, and it crushed me. It like, and that was just how evil the enemy was, and how hard the enemy was attacking me at that point in my life. Um, but anyway, were good things that were going on while I was working at the hospital. Um, I was able to save money very quickly. I was able to buy a house on beachside. It was a little beach bungalow, only about 1,000 square feet, but perfect for me being a single guy at this point in my life. Um, so, I was living there beachside. The beach was always my getaway. I would go there and walk. Um, and it was just kind of my way to process things, escape reality, things like that. So there were good things about it. Um, and I had a lot of rough relationships over the time while I was, working at the hospital. Eventually, I did meet my wife, um, and she was saved when she was 16. But at this time, she was a prodigal child, so she wasn't exactly walking in the Lord. Um, and we had our ups and downs, especially when we were first together, especially with me not being a believer at all. Um, but during this time, um, my brother had a daughter, so my niece. Um, and it was eating at me, the abuse, because I know the monster that my brother was, the demons in him, of the stuff that he could do to that child. And it was something that was eating at me slowly. I still didn't speak up right away. Um, anyway, there was a time where my brother and my wife we were playing Minecraft on the Xbox together, so Bedrock Minecraft, and there was a story that he told us, and my wife made it very clear to him um, that she has no respect for pedophiles, things like that. Conversations came up. So my brother, now knowing that, okay, he's got someone he truly loves and she has no tolerance for this, he's going to speak out eventually. And that's what I'm pretty sure was going on through his mind anyway. I don't know exactly. But he told us a story about him being abused by another kid. And I think that was to basically a way of telling me that the reason he did what he did to me was because he got abused by an older kid. To be honest, I think that's completely fabricated. I do think my brother went through some abuse. I think it was a generational abuse. I believe my grandfather abused him. I don't think my father sexually abused my brother because he never did anything like that to me. But I don't know at the same time. I do believe my father was also sexually abused growing up by my grandfather, his father. Um, Probably my aunt as well. Um, so he told us this story, and then a couple weeks later, um, just to mention, coming back out of the Navy and working at the hospital in Florida, I had started smoking marijuana again. I was a medical marijuana patient. And so my wife and I got into a really bad argument one night. And, the topic of divorce came up. And I couldn't handle it. And so I used the concentrates, the oils, things like that. I had about 10 different strands of, marijuana, all in high concentrated oils. I went and used every single strain, and, I was up there. My wife, she came in, started giving me a hard time, um, and I just couldn't listen to her. So, like, I'm basically walking away from her, and in my mind, and my wife has never hurt me or anything like this, but in my mind, um, I'm thinking she's gonna hurt me, and I'm just like, get away from me, get away from me, get away from me. I walk into the bathroom, and I go sit in the shower. It's not like a tub, it's like a walk-in shower, And like I remember grabbing we had like one of these long like toilet roll holders that was would stand so you could stack multiple pieces of toilet paper. I grabbed that and I'm like slamming it in front of me, like, get away from me, get away from me, get away from me. And my wife at this time, she doesn't know what to do. She realized that, she took it a little bit too far and she didn't know what to do. Well, this was not verbal. She said in her head, and as I mentioned, she was a prodigal child at this time, but she said in her head, Jesus, help. And I started howling, like this wailing, like these screams coming out of me. And I couldn't replicate it to this day if I tried. We didn't know at the time, but I believe I was delivered from demons at the time. Um, and, after I was done howling and wailing, and, my wife was like, honey, you need to be quiet. Like, the neighbors are going to call the police. Like, you're so loud right now. And I'm sitting there kind of shaking back and forth on the shower floor. And I say, do you want to know what real evil is? And um, for the first time in my life, I'm like 28 at this time. So from 4 to 28, the first time in my life, I told somebody. I told her what happened to me, the abuse. Um, and, she broke down and was crying. We didn't know what to do at the time. Um, and, I was just like, call my mom. Like, call my mom. I could, talk to my mom about anything. Um, so I call my mom, or Jess calls my mom, my wife. Um, and she comes over, and I meet her out in the driveway. Um, and I tell her for the abuse that happened to me, and like I needed to speak up because Amara at this point, my niece, she was probably about 3. Um, I needed to speak up, and I could no longer be quiet. Um, and I didn't know the best way to go about it. I didn't even know how to tell my dad. Just to mention, my brother is my half brother. So we have the same father, but not the same mother, which is one of the reasons I called my mom too, because I had no idea how my dad was going to react. So I was hesitant to let my mom in the house because the house was wrecked. We were very oppressed, depression going on, and the house was a mess. Anybody that would come in there, mental health professional, therapist, they would see that this is clearly depression. Um, so she comes in and we sit down, and I'm like, I don't know how we're gonna tell my father. And at that point, my wife kind of chimes in and she's like, she's the adult. She will tell your father. And my mom's like kind of agreeing, but there was a look of fear on my mom's face. I'll, never forget it. She didn't know how she was going to break the news to my dad. So anyway, she goes, we have the conversation. She goes home, my mom, and I'm under the impression she is going to tell my dad. I don't know if she did or not that night, but anyway, the next day I was on fire, meaning I was just ready to tell everybody about what happened to me. I needed to speak up. And, so I ended up leaving like my dad a voicemail, kind of saying, hey, we need to talk. We need to have a one-on-one, man-to-man. I need to tell you about what happened to me. Um, and at the same time after getting off the phone with her. And I'm probably not in the best state of mind. I'm just, all this is resurfacing, and I'm just ready to speak my truth. Now, at this time, I'm still not saved. But I ended up calling my brother's wife to basically tell her, like, hey, you need to do the right thing as a mother. You need to protect your daughter. Um, I wasn't exactly, like I said, in the right state of mind, so I probably didn't sound the most calm when I was telling her. My wife took over the phone call, told her in a more calmly manner, what's going on, what happened. Um, and we get off the phone with her. At the same time, then like I get a phone call like right away from my dad, and the first thing he says to me is, "What the f is wrong with you?" And it turns into a screaming fest. He calls my wife some, bad names, things I don't want to repeat, but um, I knew this wasn't gonna go over well. There was only a few incidents growing up, but there was a few times that my dad got physical with me or threatened to get physical with me, and just from the conversation, I knew if he came to my house, which he was on the way to my house, that it was going to get physical. Um, I at that point, I was ready to shoot him if I had to because my wife's there. I'm not going to let him hurt me. I'm not going to let him hurt my wife. This time, I'm not in shape as much because as I started working at the hospital, kind of working out went out the window. My dad's a huge power lifter. He's stronger than me. So I call my mom and I basically tell her if dad gets here before the cops get here, I'm going to shoot him. And she's like, why? I just hang up so she, can call him. Um, anyway, the cops do show up. Um, my mom does stop my dad from showing up. And I tell the police what's going on. And the police they were shocked too because, a handful of the police actually do go to their gym. Um, but, they're police officers, they hear things like this, So they weren't necessarily, too shocked. But, I'm ready to basically make a report against my brother and press charges because there's no way I can be quiet anymore and let my niece go through what I went through. And they slow me down. They're like, look, you just came out about this abuse. Memories are going to start popping into your head. Things like that. They told me take a few weeks. Make sure all the details are in there. Write the report. And, we'll send it to the police in Virginia. So from there, you know, um, my mom, I'm just going to be honest, she's a narcissist. Most of my family is. And she started trying to manipulate me. I remember one of the texts that stuck with me was, your family was always there for you. What happened to you was just a short period of your life. We've always been here for you. We love you. And that was just like, wow, 10 years? This is a short period of my life to you? 4 to 14, and I held a grudge for longest time, especially because, I wasn't saved. I was really, mad. I was angry. I didn't have the best thoughts at the time. I wasn't walking in the Lord. But I was also smart. Like, I knew if I tried to retaliate in some way or do something crazy, it's not going to end well for me. So I just need to report what happened to me and, let the police handle it. So, I remember speaking to the victim's advocate, and I told her like the stuff my parents were saying to me, and she was just like shocked. She was just like, "Oh my goodness!" Like, no, you did the right thing. Like, protect your niece. You know. Um, So anyway, things got really hard for me because now I'm like the black sheep of the family, right? No one in my family wants to talk to me. My mom, she fabricated lies, saying I was on drugs, all this other stuff, and that, oh, that this is just for money, which I don't even, doesn't even make sense. How am I going to get money out of this case? My brother tried to say that I wanted my grandmother's house for it to be left to me in the will or something like that, which, sorry, why would I want a house where I grew up and was abused at? Like, it was just, it, the enemy was trying so hard. I also owned a beachside house, so why would I want this house out in the middle of nowhere in Virginia? Things like that. Eventually, the report was sent to the Virginia Police Department for the county. Um, and the detective actually flew down to Florida. And, we had a conversation. I basically told him everything that happened. Once that report um, got started, he could also see things too, like, like I wasn't crazy, I wasn't, loony, like I was well spoken, I was educated, and just telling him straight up what happened. And he told me, he's like, well, that he, he was trying to speak to my brother, and my brother did not want to speak to him. And he said he basically knew that he did it because, in his experience, as a detective, if somebody makes up a lie about something like this horrific, whoever the person being accused is going to be banging that detective's doors down, like, what is going on, you know? And, he was also like, your story is just way too detailed. Like, I know this happened, especially after talking to me in person. He also saw that I was taking steps to try and heal. I started seeing a therapist. Not by choice, but I got a Christian therapist. Another example of how the Lord was working on me, as I mentioned, seeing the scripture on the walls at the hospital I worked at, things like that. Um, she was great. She helped me kind of get over healing my inner child of what happened to me. Taught me a lot of coping mechanisms, things that helped me. But I also didn't still quite get over the abandonment of my family and just feeling so down and hard on myself. So over the years, while I was dealing with this after coming out, I had ups and downs where sometimes I was doing good, sometimes I wasn't doing so good. I got to a point where I was about to kill myself, and I knew I needed help. Um, I was really bad off. Well, some of it was a medication issue, but I couldn't go through with it because of I couldn't do that to my wife. That's what mainly stopped me. And I knew I needed help, and I got myself checked in at the ER and told them what happened. I went to a psych unit for a week. I was on a combination of meds that I should have never been put on. So I know some of that was medication related. I know some of that was spiritual too, the enemy trying to attack me. Another, you know, sleep paralysis incident I want to speak on that happened. This will probably be the last one I touch on. But, a very common one that you hear a lot of people having the same exact type of sleep paralysis episode was I saw this very tall, like shadowy figure as I'm sleeping, and it's up to the ceiling, like almost like hovering over, like he's taller than the ceiling, and had these long, pointy hands, and it's like coming up over me, and I hear just what sounds like almost like a demonic language, like I had no idea what it was said. But in the middle of that all, I heard a voice say, "Pray for them all." And, I'm atheist, agnostic at this point, whatever you want to say. Um, and I start praying, and the voice said, pray for them all. And I wasn't even praying for myself, I was praying for everybody in the entire world. That Lord help them for whatever they're going through. And it stopped like instantly. I was able to finally breathe and come to, and what I saw was gone. Um, and that was another incident. But after getting out of the psych unit, I wanted to see therapist again. I couldn't see the first Christian therapist that I saw, so I had to find a new one. There was a time gap there where I couldn't see the therapist right away. I had to wait, but it ended up being another Christian therapist. Once again, not by choice. It was the only therapist that was I could see. And she helped me, with EMDR. It's a common one, therapeutic technique that therapists do. The previous therapist did it as well. The new one had a different style of doing it, and I felt like it worked a lot better. And she helped me get over the abandonment issues of being abandoned by my family and things like that. So anyway, I get to a better point in my life, but still ups and downs. I'm still not saved at this point, and um, stop working at the hospital. I do end up getting a remote job. I start working the remote job. Um, and just a few months in, I'm having, another bad episode. And I see not therapist, but a psychologist online, and he could see I was struggling with, medication and the different things. And, he recommended me going on short-term medical leave because I did have it. My benefits started basically day one when I started working for this company. My boss at the time did not have an issue with it. He wanted me to get better. Very good man. But yeah, it was really tough. Um, I wasn't the easiest to deal with, and times where I was supposed to be getting healed and things like that as far as my mental issues, medication. I got super addicted to this game called New World, and I basically played it 24/7. Like, I had a very unhealthy amount of hours in this game just because I was so, focused on it. Um, anyway, though, that is around the same time too when I started seeing that Christian second Christian therapist, that all this was like kind of going on. So anyway, I get a lot better. Um, but I still, have my ups and downs. We get to a point where we had like two back-to-back hurricanes, and like as I mentioned, we're on beachside in Florida. Um, we were still very oppressed, and the house is still like a wreck at this point. Like, we got it cleaned at one point, and it got very bad again. Um, my wife had a job, and they had a travel stipend bonus for like $2,000 a year for vacation. And she just got to the point where she could actually take advantage of that. And we were dealing with the hurricanes. So, we went other side of Florida, and we actually ended up staying in a hotel for about a month period. Um, During this month period, my wife is struggling, mentally as well, and I still don't know the Lord at this point. Um, and I didn't know what to say to her. I didn't know how to help her, and I knew she at this point prior to going to there, she actually started trying to go back to church again and things, even though I wouldn't go. Um, and I didn't know what to tell her, so I was just like, pray, pray. And, basically this 3 year period when all of this, was going on, and from the bathroom incident where she, said, Jesus, help, and, that experience, she got kind of back into walking with the Lord again. And she was silently praying for me for 3 years, for me to be saved. Um, and, we had a heart to help orphans, to either adopt or things like that, as we most likely couldn't have kids of our own. But, she was at a point where she's like, Father, if I don't have a believing husband, this isn't going to work. Like, fix it, save him, or show me if I'm being misled. Like, she was at a breaking point when we had these two back-to-back hurricanes, and I didn't know how to help her. And all I could say to her was just like, pray. Still not saved at this point, but I was just telling her to pray because I didn't know what to say to her. So after about a month goes by of staying in this hotel, we end up going back home, and the house is still a wreck. And I'm just in full blown panic attack. Like, I gotta do this, I gotta do this, I gotta clean this, I gotta clean that. Um, and it's not very settling for my wife at this point. Um, so she's praying. She actually saw the same Christian therapist, the second one, after I saw her. And she reached out to her for advice, for encouragement. Um, and she sent a message back. And my wife was like, I think you need to read this message. Um, and I'm still like in full blown panic attack. I'm like, I don't have time to read this message. Like, I got all this stuff to do around the house. I gotta get the house in order. Just panicking, like full on, yeah, panicking. And she keeps, kind of nagging me, like, hey, I think you should really, you know, read this message. And I just eventually said to her, like, well, can you just read it out loud to me? And I don't remember the full verse, or not full verse, but the full message. But there was a Bible verse in there, and it was Psalms 27:10. When your father and mother forsake you, the Lord will take you up. And I broke down. I started crying, and my wife looked over at me and she said, "Do I think what happened just happened?" And I said, "Yes, I do. I really do have a father." And it was like it was an instant light. Like it was like I was blind and could see for the very first time. And there was like a heaviness that was just lifted, even though that there was, the house was erect and all this other things. There was a peace there, and it was such an amazing experience. That's my favorite Bible verse. A lot of great ones out there, but that one was, I heard and the Holy Spirit did a work in me. And my faith has increased more and more every day since then. Um, and, I don't want to talk too much on some of the other things that has happened since I was saved. I may make another video down the road, but just in short, my faith increased. We experienced a lot of amazing things, just God's grace, love, and even though things weren't perfect, I finally had that peace with Him, and I was truly healed. The PTSD, the nightmares, all of that went away, like completely. I didn't experience panic attacks anymore. I didn't experience anxiety, like where to the point where it was crippling. Certain situations you may get a little anxiety, but not to the point where it was crippling to me to where I couldn't even function. I had times in the hospital prior to being saved, where I worked in IT. I would just go in a network closet. I could not function just from the anxiety and panic attacks. I would have to sit there in a dark room and just, try and cope and use things that I learned from therapy to ground me. But all that disappeared, like I didn't have any of that anymore, and it was just so amazing. Um, and, we ended up, eventually being felt led by the Holy Spirit for me to leave my remote job to sell my house. We started a traveling ministry, and we got to a point financially, we basically went into it full time, but we couldn't do it anymore. Um, so, I had to get a remote job again and things, and we do have plans to start the ministry again. We're going to go about it a little bit differently this time. It may not necessarily be a traveling ministry, um, but the Lord is just doing something amazing. He's brought so many amazing people in my life since then, and I have such a large family now, a larger family than I ever had. One of the things I did prior to leaving Florida was I left a Bible on my parents' doorstep. I tried to, open that door again with my mom, um, but she ended up, blocking me on social media, things like that. Wouldn't talk to me, which is fine. I forgive her for everything my parents did. The rest of my family did. I've even forgiven my brother. I pray for them every night, that the Lord saves them like He saved me, that they truly come to know that same peace, and so that they could have eternal life with Christ. Um, my worst enemy, who would, arguably would be my brother, um, there's no way I could wish an eternity in hell on that man, even with all the things that he's done to me. Um, Christ truly healed everything and gave me the strength to be able to forgive like he would forgive them. And, so I still pray for them. I pray that they're saved. I pray for my niece. And I pray for all my friends and family that, you know, don't know the Lord. Um, and I just want to say I did separate myself from, a lot of friends, and family as well, um, after coming to know the Lord. And it was just a part of my life I need to leave behind, and just know that there's a lot of you that necessarily didn't do anything wrong with me, and I don't have anything against any of you. I pray for, all my friends and family, and, maybe one day, that door can be reopened with some of the people that I knew in my past life, but I'm reborn. I'm a new creature, and I just, it's so amazing to me that the Lord would save somebody like me with all the bad I've done, things I've done, but His grace and mercy is just so amazing. Um, and, just last one thing I want to say, what Jesus is to me. He's, not only my Father in heaven, but He is my best friend. I talk to Him every day. I pray to Him throughout the day. And, I hope this really encourages someone, because no matter what type of abuse you went through, whether it was what I went through or some other form of abuse, Christ can change your life. He can. Just pray. Pray for the Holy Spirit to save you and do a work in you. And, if it's in the Lord's will, it'll be done. And I just hope this really encouraged someone. Please feel free to leave a comment below, um, and I'll get back to you. But if you've stuck around this entire time, thank you for listening, and God bless you.